Hello, it's week 26 of season 6 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is The County Clerk. Barney, what's going on this week?
He's got a new county clerk. His name is Howard Stragg. And Andy is looking for all the accident reports of the last 20 years because Howard has asked for them. And Ulti says Mr. Stragg is kind of a funny fellow. All the kids at school think that. He can't even throw a baseball. And Andy says he knew him in high school. He was kind of a funny fellow.
So Andy takes the reports that he can find down there. He couldn't find all 20 years. And he meets Irene Fairchild, who's the new county health officer. She's taking over Howard's old office, and Howard's moving next door.
And then he goes to Howard's office. It turns out Howard is using the retorts to do an analysis of accidents related to population growth. He's down to 1.7 differential. He sure does like his facts and figures. And then this Fairchild comes in to return something she found in Howard's old office. And after she leaves, Andy says she's pretty. Maybe Howard would like to spend some time with her. And Howard says he don't have the time with all his work. And then Howard's mother walks in, and she tells Howard not to forget about their bridge game tonight. And then she makes sure that Howard had a hot lunch and that he's wearing an undershirt.
And that night, Andy tells Helen that Howard sure is still tied to his mother's apron strings, and he's still kind of strange, just like he was in high school. And he says Howard didn't even seem interested in the pretty lady in the office next door.
And Helen says let's invite her and Howard on a double date. And Andy says no, they already know each other, and they know whether they want to date each other. We should stay out of it. So Helen gives Andy the silent treatment until he gives in. He says he'll ask Howard tomorrow. And when Andy goes into Howard's office, there's a couple in there who has a fight and changes their mind about getting a marriage license. And Howard's got a statistic about how often that happens too. And Andy tells him the idea of the double date at Morelli's restaurant tonight, and he says he'll call his mother to check.
And the audience can see when she's talking on the phone to Howard that she's not real happy that he's making plans without her, and she's also not happy that he's going out with her girl.
And then that couple comes back in to change their mind and get a marriage license, just like Howard said the statistics said they would. And that night Andy goes to pick up Howard at his mother's house where he lives. And before Howard comes out, she tells Andy that she don't encourage Howard to go out much because he's got his career to think of. And when they leave, she purposely makes Howard feel guilty about leaving her alone. And she says she'll find something to do alone. And then she says she's got a headache and a shooting pain in her neck. But that still, he should go on and have a good time. And Irene is already at Helen's house. And when Howard and Andy go to get them, the conversation between Howard and Irene is kind of awkward. They don't have much to talk about. And at the restaurant, Howard has to leave the table to call his mother and see how she is. And when he comes back, he says she said she's bored and she's still having shooting pains.
And then the dancing between Howard and Irene is kind of awkward at first, but then later they start dancing real well and having a good time with each other.
And then Howard calls his mother to check on her again, and this time she don't answer the phone. So they all go over there, and they find her laid out on the couch. She says she was alone, she was nervous, and she didn't have the strength to get up and answer the phone. But she says she should be okay now. So Andy and Helen and Irene leave. And the next day Andy tells Helen in the courthouse, I told you it was a mistake getting involved in other folks' lives. And Helen says the problem is all the mother. And Andy says Howard said earlier today he probably won't be going out again soon. He don't want to leave his mother.
And Helen wants Andy to go talk to Miss Sprague and explain to her that she's got to loosen up on Howard. He says, no, bad idea. And then she gives him the silent treatment again until he gives in again.
And he goes and tells her, while they're drinking tea, that he's always admired her for how she's devoted her life to Howard. He says she's made a lot of sacrifice for him, and now she deserves to go out and have a life for herself. And she says he's given her a lot to think about. So that night, the original two couples double date again with Miss Straight coming along, and she dances with Andy until 2 in the morning, while the other 3 of them had to sit and watch. And then Helen admits it was a bad idea for Andy to go talk to Miss Straight, and then she thinks of a guy her age named Mr. Judson, and she wants Andy to fix the nut.
We'll see you next week for episode 27.